Hey, so this is going to be a new series that I start on this channel where we do some exercises, some level design blockout exercises. And these are things that I do in an actual live environment when I'm developing maps or POIs or any type of level design. And I just also want to preface too that these things are very contextualized. Like sometimes it's very scenario based too, because something that I say is to do here may not apply somewhere else. So it's very situational. Some of these things may or may not apply to the scenario you're in. So it just depends on how you're trying to balance or design an area. But these are more generalizations that can be applied broadly. So don't take this as like the Bible. But let's get into it. So this first exercise is simply how can we make this cube a more interesting play space within just this cube. And you can expand upon it and add on to it, but generally with just this cube, this shell. Now for this, I'm going to use the cube grid, which I'm not a big fan of for level design. It's good for like very broad shapes, macro shapes, but when you start getting into interiors and stuff and try to get more precise and interesting shape language, it's a lot harder to do with cube grid. You have a lot less control. So I'm not a big fan of it, but for this instance, I'm going to use it because I'm going to keep the shapes fairly simple and very gameplay friendly and square. So the first thing that I'm thinking of is adding some kind of interior. And I don't know contextually what I'm going to make this out to be, and I'm not worried about that right now. That can play a factor in helping, but just to get some interesting shape language going, I'm not too worried about if this is like a facility or a research center or a house or whatever. I'm not worried about that. The only thing I'm worried about is getting some interesting shapes and making some interesting layout for a first-person shooter. So that's going to be the first step that I go with, is try to get some kind of interior going. And maybe some platform to kind of post up on and hold a power position within this building. So I'm going to do that, and it's going to be a time lapse, and then I will come back once I do that or finish that section. All right, so I kind of went ahead and also did something else that I like doing, which I'm going to expand upon it a little more, but I decided to go ahead and cut right there so I can kind of fill in what I'm doing. So for like broad shapes on buildings, what I really like to do is add big bulky cover to make the gameplay on the exterior a lot fun. So like these big posts here that's kind of extruding out from the main building gives you some nice cover to kind of like poke behind. And then same with here. I'm going to expand upon this, but I just kind of wanted to quickly go over that because I do that a lot in my designs, or depending on the game, of course, too. And again, what I'm trying to achieve with that area, sometimes that doesn't call for, structural cover like that. So it's all situational and what you're trying to achieve. But as you see, I went ahead and did the interior. So I made this space a little more interesting. Instead of it just being the cube, you can go ahead and come in here and kind of post up at this spot here. So you can imagine this is going to be like the anchor spot or the hot spot for players to kind of gravitate towards and kind of like scan the area, or even have your front lines right here. So that's a really good thing to have when you're designing things, especially for a first-person competitive shooter, is predictability. And a good thing about doing interiors where there's one specific area that's like more enticing for players to be, whether that's because it's a power position, defensive position, or a safe position, it makes combat a lot more predictable and breaching buildings. So when players are coming up to this building from a distance, they know like, hey, they're most likely going to be in this area because it's the go-to spot that everybody kind of goes to for whatever reason that is. So that helps out a lot. If you add in cover here, a big post over here, it kind of like muddies up the building and puts people everywhere and anywhere, and it just kind of causes sporadic gameplay that isn't too fun for the attackers or the defenders. But I'm going to go ahead and go to this next stage, which is the bulky cover around the building, and just kind of giving like a unique silhouette to this building or this hut, whatever you want to call it. And there'll be another time lapse, and then we'll go from there. All right, so I kind of started going ahead of myself again, going with the next stage, but I'm going to stop there and kind of just briefly go over what I did. So I added in some more cover around this building and some more bulky shapes to kind of give it an interesting shape around the front here. And then there was this really weird corner piece that was right here. And the thing about shooters is you definitely don't want to be ambiguous with cover or like cover spots like little cubbies, which this 1 meter cube or 100 unit spot would have been pretty ambiguous and very clunky with the collision. So when you're hiding right here, you would think, oh, I'm kind of tucked away in this corner here, and I'm safe. But in reality, you're not, and your leg and arms are sticking out. So any type of like weird situation like that, I kind of like to round off or get rid of, just so players aren't caught up on that or think they're safe. So something like this is great because it's 200 units thick and you're covered. It's very clear that you're covered. You can kind of sit here, get some heals off. It's not super safe, so it's a risky spot, but it's a quick heal. So if you're in combat and you need to run somewhere quick and get some heals, this is the spot. And that's the thing too, is like with a fast-paced shooter, you don't want players. A lot of times when you get into combat and you kind of get the wrong end of the stick, or you're closer to dying than the other person, players will retreat, and you don't want them to retreat like 10 seconds into the combat and then finally find a space that they feel safe to kind of heal off. So you want to give some areas where they can kind of tuck away in and feel safe and not cheated by the design to get some safe heals. Because if that wasn't there, they were sitting here at this corner and they got healed off, they'd have to run all the way in here. Or like, I'm kind of safe here, but it still got me in the line of sight of that, so I'll probably have to run around here, and that's still not safe. So there's not many safe spots. So most likely they would probably tuck right here, even though it's kind of still in the line of sight, because you still can kind of challenge and contest the players from pushing this building. So this gives another safe option to allow players to heal. Another thing to kind of keep out on a lookout is I already know this mentally in these little ledges here. So players can jump on that, and you'll have to know if you want that or not. So like if somebody's coming out this way, they can get shot from a weird angle. Now, I'm going to make this up here playable too, so it still can happen, but the way that I'm going to design it, it's not going to be as easy to kind of look down on, and the way that I do this, I'll go over once I get to that point. But that is something that I take a mental note of, and I will test and see if that's something that is frustrating, or if that's something I want to keep, or if I want to like round it off, or what I want to do there. Kind of like here, where there's an interesting shape, but you can't stand on that. You'll jump down and slide off. So that is something that I'm keeping in mind, and that I do keep in mind when I'm making a building. So I kind of started going on to the next stage, which is I want to add a second floor. So this cube that we started with, I now want to make a play space on top. So that's what I'm going to work towards next, is getting some kind of play space up top here. And that's kind of what I started doing with this. Now this right here is really messy. This right here, like if you have player mechanics where you can slide down, it's not good to like right into a wall, or kind of like into a trap hole, and then you got weird collision right here, like you can't run straight out, you have to jump over. So this area definitely needs cleaned up, and I don't want to keep it like this, but I'm trying to keep the silhouette as clean as possible and compact as possible. So I don't want to put like extruding stairs going out this way, because that doesn't really make sense. Because when you think of a building like this top down, a lot of the times, let me just pull up a marker so it'll be easier. A lot of times players say you're inside here and you want to run on top of the building, so you're on the bottom floor here. You'll go this way, and then you'll have to come out this way, and that just is weird. This like extrusion that you have to do away from the building if the staircase is pointing out that way it can mean winning or losing the fight. So with staircases that are angled the way that I have them are just a lot better, and it makes more sense. It's a lot more clean and a lot easier to understand, and quicker, fast paced. And it just makes things easier. Now, it does, again, make things more accessible from people coming in. So if you want this building to be easily attacked, that may be what you want, is the staircase to kind of go out that way, which will make it easier for attackers to access the building, or at least on top of the building. So again, a lot of these things that I'm saying are very situational. There's always but this, but that, but this, what if that. It all depends on how you're trying to design the building or design the play space. And these are just kind of the things that I'm keeping in mind when I'm doing this, and kind of how I like to design specific buildings, because a lot of times, and this depends on the game you're making too. If you're working on something that's more Call of Duty, where it's more fast-paced, get in, get out, go on to the next thing, you're not really anchoring a building down, so you don't need to have that like that. But if you're doing something that's like Apex, where it's more holding positions and such, it makes more sense to do that. But yeah, again, it's all situational. So I'm going to do that now, where I start making a way to the top, and then I'm going to start adding the top of this building, and I will be back. It'll be another time lapse. All right, I'm going to quickly talk about this because I'm using Cube Grid for like the second time here. Again, I'm not a big fan of Cube Grid. It's good for like very broad shapes. Anyways, I went on my little tangent about it earlier, but so why this is bad and why I'm going to restart on this. When you're coming up the steps, like you want it to be pretty quick. You want it to either be like at this within a quarter of the building rooftop. Like you don't want the player going over 90% of the building on the rooftop and then, have that entire time you're getting blasted in the back. So like you come up here and then you're like, you're just exposed the entire time, and it's not good. So you want to be able to get the player at least halfway into it so you can scan the room. But the one positive for this, though, again, depending on how the building is designed, maybe there's an entire wall here, so you're not exposed coming up the ramp. But the way that I'm going to do it, the ramp will be exposed. This does allow you to get into a position to where you can then scan the entire room. So this works perfectly for that. Like if you had, like I said, a wall covering you, that's perfect. You can now see the entire room, versus if you go into the middle, you kind of have to look left and right, and it's a little more difficult and harder to parse, especially when art comes in. And that's one thing you have to keep in mind as a designer too, is when things will look clean and easy to read in blockout stage. But once art, lights, effects, audio, and all that, there's a lot of cognitive overload, even if it's not very cognitive overload. But in the heat of the moment when people are playing and it's very fast paced and they're in the heat, like they're being chased and they're also trying to scan the room, and then there's a computer making a buzz noise, and then there's sparks over here, and then there's roaches crawling on the ground, and there's a rat falling from the ceiling. Like it takes away from being able to make quick and good decisions. And when you're scanning the left and the right side, it's a lot harder versus like something right here. I just wanted to quickly go over that, and let me get back to this. I'm going to scratch this entire thing here and start over. All right, so now back with that, I got the top part kind of blocked in a little bit, and I did the staircase a little better. It's still not to my exact liking, but it's good for playtesting. It's a good starting point. There's nothing that's like super egregious that pops out at me that is like this can't stand. But we're going to test it out and kind of run around and see what I'm thinking and how it's feeling. So it's a pretty good silhouette, kind of identifiable. I'm not a fan of this shape right here up front. So I may extrude this a little more, one more, and kind of get the same vibe over there. We'll see. I kind of like this little lip right here underneath here. Again, this power position allows you to kind of like look out and scan the area. I'm not a fan of these steps right here. I'll probably thin this out a little bit because I'm sticking to pretty much 100 units, which is pretty bulky. Again, pretty fine. This cubby here, nice little heel spot. But coming down the steps, it might look like a doorway. So we'll see. Maybe we'll add something in like a slide under to the other side. That way it's not a complete door, because that'll overwhelm this area a little bit. So maybe a slide under so you're a little vulnerable when attacking. So we'll go up the steps here. You're pretty exposed all over there. So I need to put some railings in here to give you some cover while coming up here. And you got this. Doesn't feel too bad. And kind of what I was talking about earlier is the way, again, Unreal's default capsule is really fat. So, but generally when I do a second or third floor, I like to make the the cover up here, the railing, a little taller than half height, even though this is half height or half cover. But it's just the capsule's so big in Unreal. So the reason that is because you're already at the advantage when you're holding high ground. So you don't want to be able to just shoot people. As you see, I don't have a line of sight down there, so you don't want to be able to just shoot people on top of the head. So I make it to where you have to jump up on these railings to shoot down. And that's just kind of help balancing the building out from the top floor. And again, not that having an angle on the bottom is a bad thing. It's all situational. So I may design a building where I do want the power position to be up here, and I do want players to be able to shoot down and kind of like fish in a barrel type thing. So again, it's all situational, but in this case, I do not want that. So that is why I am doing this taller railing where you have to kind of jump up and be able to kind of see all the way at the bottom. Now there may be some areas where I can put some holes here to allow you to kind of peek over and give you specific angles that I want. But right here, I definitely don't want, because like I said, that's more of a healing area. And it's also, not only is it a balance for that too, but you got to think of like audio cues. So when you're playing, you're listening for people to mantle, to jump. And if you're on the bottom floor and you hear me mantle or jump up on this, you kind of have a mental note, one, where I am, and two, that I am on top of the railing so I can drop down on you. So it kind of prepares you as well with audio, not just blocking the line of sight for players on top there. So this right here might be a little too deep. So there's a couple things I could do with this to showcase that it's not a door. And this is kind of a topic that I've always talked about when designing. I don't like, in some cases this might be a bad thing, but personally, me as a designer, I don't mind a Playspace being learnable and not have everything handed to you on a platter. And what I mean by that is like, this is kind of an imperfection. Like, is it an imperfection to the point where it makes the player want to uninstall or never play the game again? No. Imperfections like this are good because it gives the area or the play space more depth to learn. When you start chiseling away all those little imperfections and all those learning aspects, like, I consider this a little exploration. And it's like nothing compared to like a third-person action adventure exploration game, but a competitive first-person shooter, this, like something like this, when you have like a space that a player is trying to map out and they're actively on the sticks learning the layout and the shape of a building, I consider that some nice exploration in the first person, where it's not too overwhelming and it's not like I'm going on some side quest to find some animal or whatever. Little things like this just add more depth to your design, even if it's unintentional, like it is now. Now, like, I could chisel away this imperfection and kind of make it very clear that this is not a pathway. So when players are running, they don't just kind of do that. And like, there's depending on the game and how big your player base is, like, there's going to be cases 100% where players do get frustrated with this, but they're going to learn, and it's going to be a learned experience where they now know, like, there's going to be tons of times where it's frustrating because they thought it was a doorway and it is not a doorway. But they'll get over it the next match. They'll now know that is not a pathway. And it's just kind of like one of those things where it's like, it might be annoying for the time being, but then it's like, there's scenarios where this may play in your favor. So it's kind of like you can't live with it and you can't live without it type thing. And I personally, I know a lot of designers who would, try to hit this area with the sledgehammer and take it away, or like make it very clear, which that isn't wrong either. But I think kind of what I'm getting at, I know this is kind of a long tangent, is it just takes away the depth of a play space when you start chiseling away all the imperfections and everything's so sterile and straightforward. Like for a competitive sense, yes, you want that, and competitive players love that, where it's cut dry, A, B, C, D, and it's very simple. But for in my opinion, for a longevity of a play space, or a longevity for funness to happen, or like some random situations to happen, getting rid of that is a bad idea. And kind of like I said, is like, even if it's a bad thing, like a player getting caught and they thought it was a doorway and then they get gunned down here and they get frustrated, or like they get shot here and they run and they kind of hide here and they get a heal off, and then the other person comes and then they hit them with a shotgun and win the gunfight, and then now they're happy. So it's depending on how you want to look at this spot. And I know this is like so simple, but trust me, it adds up when you do this over the course of an entire map. There's, depending on how you want to spin it, you can spin it either way. Like I said, you can look at it as a positive. There will be positives from this situation, and there will be negatives of this situation. And in my opinion, that is healthy for a map or a POI, or a level for a competitive, or not even just a competitive, but a shooter in general. All right, side tangent over. So next thing I'm going to do is kind of go over some of those notes that I talked about, like adding some cover up here on these railings, and then I'm going to start adding some interesting shape up top here, and making it more identifiable from a distance. So I want this building to kind of like be somewhat of a landmark, but not like a major POI, but more like a supporting building. And I may look to clean this up here. We'll see, because it's not too bad, but we'll see how I feel when I do these other things. So be back. All right, so I'm going to kind of go over what I did within that time lapse. So I added a shape up here, give us some gameplay, some posts to kind of hide behind and get some tall cover. So it's not just crouching up here, so you can kind of peek, but it's not too overpowering for the players on the ground. There are some like cheeky angles, so you kind of have to teeter back and forth within this angle. Again, I don't want it to be too overwhelming. So if I would make this bulkier, then you're super safe and you could just kind of peek, go back and cover, peek, go back and cover this. You're kind of, it's very skillful to kind of hide behind that. So you got some gameplay out of this shape. You got some gameplay out of this shape up here to call out. This could be some kind of like radio tower, or depending on the game, there could be some kind of plasma tower, or I don't know, some kind of receptor. I don't know, some H2O receiver, or like maybe like this pumps stuff out into the atmosphere. You could take this with and kind of do whatever you skin it however you want. Again, depending on the game you're making, the type of game you're making. When you're making something that's more like futuristic or not realistic, it's a lot better for designers because you can make interesting shapes like this and be more creative with your shape language, because you have a lot more runway of what this thing can be. Again, and sometimes I go into designing something where I specifically know the theme of the building, and you build the shapes around that theme. But in this case, I just wanted to throw some shapes together and make an interesting play space, and what can we make into this building. So added some shapes up here. Players could walk up here, but am I worried about that? No, because it's like you're not really gaining much out of that. Other than like if a team's pushing you can get some pretty cheeky angles, but this is something that I would leave in, and I would again have a mental note of this, knowing that it could be problematic. Not so much for, again, holding, like, you're pretty exposed when you're up here, and it's not smart to be up here, but the most problem areas could come from when you're coming up this ramp and you got another layer to worry about on top of this. I think the top part here is pretty much done. There is some things that I can do that I'm thinking of doing, and that's like adding some kind of visibility down below. So maybe like a hole that you can see players down low, and you can kind of get a visual cue. But I don't think I want to do that. Again, that's something that I will also make a mental note of if this were a real thing, of course. So yeah, another thing that I did is I was going to go with the crawl space here, like where you can slide under, but then it's not that good to then hold this bottom section, and it's kind of like useless. So I decided not to do that. But one thing that I did add is the ability to throw tacticals in here, smoke, stuns, grenades, whatever the case may be. So you can throw some stuff in here and kind of like cause some chaos before pushing. So it's a nice little tactical window. So next thing I'm going to do is look to kind of make this a little safer, because right now it's like free reign. Again, it's still not that great to want to be in here. So I'm going to look to maybe adding some big doors, or maybe a wall here. You got a door here, and I don't have any interactable doors, so just imagine there's like an actual door here that you can interact with. So I'm gonna probably just wall this up, maybe put a window here, not one that you can shoot through, but one that you can visually see through, and kind of leave this back spot exposed like this, and maybe add in some cover here. We'll see. I'll play around with that, but that's kind of what I'm thinking to do next. So that's what I'm going to start on. Be right back. All right, so I'm back. I'll quickly go over the things that I changed. So I was just kind of toying around with line of sights and just kind of imagining gameplay. And when you've played so much competitive shooters and when you have designed so many spaces, you just kind of know what works and what doesn't. When even before playing, like especially very like low level things. So I just kind of toyed around with the lines of sights and how the space felt moving through it, coming through here and like just entering in this building now is a lot more digestible and easy to read, like right off the rip. Like you're not coming in here and overwhelmed with a bunch of things. I'm going to add a little more complexity to this because right now it's just kind of a room. So I might add in one like thing, one or two things in here to kind of like make combat a little more spicy. So there's not much to kind of like play around with or have any like cat and mouse in here. So this bottom area, I also closed off this whole area. So this is the power position looking out. You can mantle through and get out, but it's not like Swiss cheese anymore. And I got rid of this hard corner here. You can still kind of hug it, but got rid of it. And that just helps with like readability when coming in this way. You can add that in. It just kind of like makes it a little harder to also hold down this door. So if I'm perfectly parallel or it's anyways facing the door head on, it's a lot easier to hold it down and kind of challenge people from challenging you. So I kind of like softened it to prevent that. You could do it, but you don't have such a tight angle, and you kind of have to be pushed up forward to do so. What else? This window here, I don't have any transparent materials. Just imagine this is a actual glass. Again, depending on the game, you may have breakable glass. Hopefully you don't have breakable glass, but you may have bulletproof glass. All depends. I don't want this to be accessible for people to be shot from, so that'll just be bulletproof glass. It's just more of a visual into the play space before entering it. And yeah, so I'm gonna add one to two more things. I'm gonna toy around and with some things that I'm thinking in my head, and then I'll let you know. This shouldn't take too long. All right, so what I did here is added in a pillar. Might make this space a little too claustrophobic now, but it definitely, the FOV is really zoomed in with this. So it might have made this area a little too claustrophobic, but I like the concept of adding that. But I don't like how tight the space feels, so I'm gonna probably do something different. Even like that is nice. Something like that coming in, you kind of have something to tuck behind. But I'm not the fan of how tight it makes the space feel now. So I'm going to try something else, and we'll come back when I have something else to show. All All right, I think I'm gonna go with this one. Kind of the same concept, but kind of splitting up the floor here and then getting rid of the top part, because that's kind of what made it feel super claustrophobic. I may even get rid of this here, this corner, go ahead and get rid of the corner bit here. Just to kind of give it a little more breathing room. And then keep the corner like that. I may even go back one more. This will give the Playspace a little more breathing room. Yeah, I think this is a lot better. So I'm liking this a lot more. It kind of segments this top spot here and allows people to kind of like do some cat and mouse peekaboo here. The good thing is like you're at a disadvantage being here if you're being contested, because yes, you're covered from this, but then you're open from this. And if you're covered from that door, then you're open to this door. So that is the balance with this area. So, yeah, and since this is a power position, I want this to be harder to contest. And it's not even that it's harder to contest. It's more so it's easy to kind of defend and hold your own, and you're not put at a disadvantage for being in this power position. So yeah, I'm liking this a lot. This is probably good enough for the interior. And honestly, it's probably enough for the exterior. And I'm not sure how long this video is going to be, but yeah, I think I know one thing that I want to do is add in the cover here, but I don't know if like doing it one by one. I don't know. I guess that's kind of like the bad thing with Cube Grid is like stuff like this. When you're doing things at like angles and 45s, it's a little more difficult to kind of get the shapes. Maybe there's a way that I'm just not familiar with. I'm sure there is. But yeah, I just wish there was a way to like take it and kind of like skew it upwards. But I don't know if there is a way. I'm sure if I sit here and mess with it for a bit, there is. But that's kind of like the closing thing that I want to do is that. Not a big deal. But other than that, I wish I kept the cube. Let me, I think it was, let's see. I think I still, let me go into the top down. And this is another thing too. I wish the top down actually worked, because it like puts it all the way at the bottom. Yeah, we'll just, I think it was like something like that. Sure, we'll say that. So we went from this to this. It's not that bad. It's a pretty interesting building. Some nice gameplay here. And again, kind of closing thoughts. All the mental notes that I have is, I'll also make one more mental note. Generally, shapes like this aren't that good for shooters, because it's ambiguous, and like brushing across it feels really weird, but it's not at a steep enough angle where you kind of like ramp up on it. At least it shouldn't be. Yeah, so things like that is like when you're kind of brushing across things, you don't want to be like jittering and bouncing up and down, but and also like this is a weird angle. This FOV is really weird looking. I don't know if it's like the camera that I'm using, but it doesn't look like it's 90. It looks like it's about 60 or 70. But yeah, so those are some mental notes that I would keep, and then that little platform, and then those platforms up there. And then obviously like all this above this area is non-playable. You would, you know, clip that accordingly. But yeah, that's that. See you guys hopefully on the next one.